Clara gently pushed the heavy oak door shut behind her, praying the sound wouldn't echo through the gray dawn light. Her heart still raced from the events of the night, and exhaustion clung to her bones like a second skin. She set her canvas shoes down softly on the marble floor of the foyer, wincing at the slight scuff they made, and held her breath. Maybe, just maybe, no one had noticed she'd been gone all night. "Where were you last night?" The voice sliced through the silence like a blade. Clara's stomach dropped. She looked up to see Vincent Romano standing at the top of the grand staircase, his broad shoulders rigid and his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles had turned white. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, a charcoal dress shirt now wrinkled and half unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms corded with tension. Dark circles smudged the skin beneath his storm gray eyes, and the shadow of stubble darkened his sharp jaw. He had been waiting. Clara's mouth went dry. Vincent's stare pinned her in place, half in shadows and half in the weak morning light that spilled through the tall windows of his Chicago mansion. In the year she had worked as his live-in housekeeper, Clara had seen that menacing glare directed at others, at trembling business associates, disobedient subordinates, even once at a rival who dared show up unannounced at the Romano estate. But never at her. Now all of that cold fury bore down on her 5'3" frame, making her feel like one of those guilty men caught in the crosshairs of the Mafia boss. His eyes dropped, raking over her appearance, and Clara flushed under his scrutiny. Her simple cotton dress was smeared with dirt at the hem, and a faint stain darkened one sleeve. She hadn't exactly had time to clean herself up after everything. But it was the way Vincent's gaze narrowed, zeroing in on something near her cheekbone, that made her blood run cold. He descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing through the marble foyer like a death knell. Clara instinctively stepped back, her shoulders pressing against the closed door. She couldn't retreat any further. He had deliberately positioned himself between her and the rest of the house, caging her in the entryway with nowhere to run. What secrets was Clara hiding? And why did the most dangerous man in Chicago seem to care so much about where his housekeeper had spent the night? If this story satisfies your soul, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a good tale. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. "Where did you go last night?" Vincent repeated the question, his voice dropping into something a notch more dangerous as he stepped down the final stairs. Each footfall rang out like the drums of fate against the marble floor. Clara felt her heart skittering wildly in her chest. She swallowed hard and tried to keep her voice steady. "I had a personal matter to take care of." The moment the answer left her lips, she knew how weak it sounded. Vincent stopped a few steps away, storm-gray eyes narrowing with suspicion. "A personal matter," he repeated, tasting each word as if it were bitter on his tongue. "You vanished all night without a single word. You think I'm going to believe that excuse?" He moved one step closer, and Clara instinctively pressed her back tighter to the oak door behind her. There was nowhere left to retreat. His cologne drifted in, sandalwood threaded with cigarette smoke, mingling with the cold sweat beading on her forehead. "I'm sorry if I worried you," Clara whispered, trying to soothe the storm gathering in his eyes. But her apology only seemed to make Vincent angrier. He came forward, erasing the last bit of space between them. His hand lifted, rough fingers, gentle yet unyielding, closed around her chin and tipped her face toward the thin, weak light spilling through the high window. Clara drew in a sharp breath as his eyes narrowed, his pupils pinning themselves to a spot just beneath her left cheekbone. "What is this?" Vincent's voice suddenly sank into something terrifyingly quiet. His thumb moved with a careful slowness, touching the patch of skin she knew was hiding a bruise. The concealer she had painstakingly put on hours earlier had surely worn away long ago. Clara jerked her face free of his hand and dropped her gaze, dodging that penetrating stare. "It's nothing. I fell. I tripped on a stair outside." She heard her own voice tremble and hated herself for it. Fell. Vincent echoed the word, his tone edged with bitter, mocking disbelief. In his world, bruises like that did not come from accidents. They came from a man's fist. Silence stretched between them, heavy and airless. Clara could hear her heart screaming in her ears. Then, suddenly, Vincent spoke, each word like a bullet fired. "You went to see a man, didn't you?" Clara snapped her head up, green eyes wide with shock. "What? No." She denied it before she could even think. "A man?" He truly thought she had slipped away for the night with someone else? Her cheeks burned, partly with anger at the baseless accusation, and partly with something else she would not name. The truth was, her heart was racing not only from fear, but from the realization that Vincent Romano, The coldest Mafia boss in Chicago seemed to be jealous. He cared where she had gone. He had stayed up all night waiting for her to come back. The thought was both frightening and made her tremble in an entirely different way. "There is no one else," Clara said, her voice steadier this time. "I swear. I didn't go to meet a lover, or anyone like that." Vincent stared at her, searching her eyes for the smallest sign of a lie. A long moment passed. Then he stepped back, jaw clenched tight. "You're confined," he declared coolly. "You don't leave this house until I allow it. Marcus will watch your every move." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but his look made every word die in her throat. There was something in those storm-gray eyes, not only anger, there was worry, there was concern, and there was something deeper still that she did not dare to guess at. Vincent turned and started back up the stairs, but stopped halfway. "If someone is hurting you," he said, not turning around, "I need to know." Then he disappeared into the upstairs corridor, leaving Clara standing there with a shattered heart and a secret weighing down on her shoulders more than ever. Clara closed her door and leaned back against it, her legs trembling so badly she could barely stay upright. She slid down to the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and tried to steady the ragged, chaotic rhythm of her breathing. The small room meant for the maid had, in a blink, become a prison, and Vincent's confinement order landed on her like a death sentence. She could not go out, she could not meet Derek, and if she could not meet him, Lily would. Clara choked on the thought. Tears ran down her cheeks, stinging as they tracked over the bruise. She dragged herself to the window and looked out at the sprawling garden of the Romano estate, slowly brightening in the first light of dawn. The Chicago sky was the same dirty gray as her mood. 6 months. 6 months she had lived in this hell. Memory surged like a tidal wave, yanking her under and pulling her back into the hurt. 6 months earlier, Clara had been working the night shift at a small diner in the suburbs of Chicago. 2 years since she had run from Derek Vance. 2 years in which she had believed she was free. She had changed her name, changed cities, cut every line that tied her to the past. But that night, when she stepped out the back door of the diner, a black car was already waiting. Derek emerged from the shadows, his smile still as cruel as she remembered, his eyes still as cold as steel. "Did you miss me, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice sweet in that fake way that made her stomach turn. Then he lifted his phone. On the screen was Lily, her little girl, the child she had been forced to leave with her grandmother when she fled, because she could not bear to drag her into a life of running. Lily was crying, green eyes just like her mother's wide with fear, tied to a chair in a dark room. "Do what I say," Derek whispered into Clara's ear, "or the little girl dies. It's that simple." Clara blinked and hauled herself back to the present. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and went to the battered old suitcase in the corner. With shaking fingers, she opened the lock, rummaged beneath the clothes, and pulled out a cheap phone hidden deep at the bottom. That phone was the only thread connecting her to her daughter, and it was also the chain that kept her bound to Derek. Last night, she had risked everything to sneak out and meet him in a dark alley on the south side. She had brought the information she had collected after weeks of watching, scraps of notes about Vincent's schedule, about private meetings, about names she had overheard by accident. In exchange, Derek let her see Lily on a video call for exactly 2 minutes. The child looked thinner now, her eyes hollowed by lack of sleep, and yet she still tried to smile when she saw her mother. "Mommy," Lily whispered through the screen, "I miss you." Clara had bitten down so hard her lip bled just to keep from breaking apart. Then Derek ended the call. He looked over the information she had brought, and his face darkened by degrees. "That's all?" he snarled. "You've been in Romano's house for half a year and this is all the useless crap you've got?" The first slap sent her stumbling. The second blow, a punch, struck her cheekbone and dropped her onto the cold concrete. "I need the shipment details," Derek hissed through his teeth, fists tangled in her hair as he yanked her back up. "Day and time, location. I need to bring Romano down, and you're going to help me do it. You understand?" Clara nodded, tears mixing with the blood at the corner of her split mouth. She understood. She always understood. Derek Vance wanted Vincent Romano's empire. He wanted Chicago territory, and he would use her daughter like a pawn to get it. The phone vibrating in her hand snapped Clara back again. She looked down at the screen, and her heart seemed to stop when she read Derek's message. 48 hours. Bring me information about the Saturday night shipment. Don't try anything. Clara tightened her grip around the phone, her eyes lifting toward the window where the Chicago sky was slowly brightening. 48 hours. She had 48 hours to find what Derek needed. But she was confined, watched every moment, and if she failed, Lily would pay for it with her life. Clara stepped out of her room at midday, forcing her face into something normal, as if nothing had happened. The moment she set foot in the hallway, she saw Marcus Chen standing there, his back against the opposite wall, dark eyes, sharp and unblinking as they tracked her. He was Vincent's most trusted bodyguard, an Asian man around 40, with a blank expression and a solid, stone-carved build. Clara had seen him take down 3 men in only a few seconds at a party when someone dared to start trouble. Marcus said nothing. He only tipped his head in the faintest greeting, then began to follow behind her, keeping a distance of a few steps but staying close enough that she could feel his presence like a shadow she could never outrun. Clara swallowed hard and went down the stairs toward the kitchen. She had to act normal. She had to work like any other day, and she had to find information about the Saturday night shipment at any cost. The Romano Mansion's kitchen was vast and modern, all gleaming stainless steel and white marble counters. Rosa Martinez, the cook who had worked for the Romano family for more than 20 years, stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She was a plump Mexican woman with silver hair twisted into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, and warm brown eyes that always seemed full of care. Rosa was the only person in this house who treated Clara like a human being, instead of an invisible shadow. "Buenos dias, mija," Rosa said without turning around, as if she had eyes in the back of her head. "You're up late today." Clara stepped beside her, took the apron from its hook, and tied it on. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a little tired." Rosa turned, and her eyes narrowed at once when she saw Clara's face. She set the ladle down, came closer, and gently took Clara's chin, tipping her toward the light, just as Vincent had done this morning. But Rosa's hand was soft and warm, not rough and tense. "Mija," she whispered, worry thick in her voice. "What happened to you?" Clara felt her eyes burn. The honest concern in Rosa's tone cut into her like a knife. She wanted to cry. She wanted to tell this good woman everything. But she could not. Anyone who knew the truth would be in danger, and Rosa did not deserve to carry that. "I'm fine," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I just fell." Rosa looked at her with eyes that made it clear she did not believe a word of it, but she did not press. She only sighed, stroked Clara's cheek with a tender touch, then turned back to the soup. "If you ever need to talk, Rosa is always here." Clara nodded, and turned her face away to hide the tears threatening to spill. She threw herself into work, wiping counters, arranging supplies, sweeping and cleaning the empty rooms, but her eyes never stopped watching. She memorized the position of every security camera, the times the guards changed shifts, which rooms Vincent visited most often. Marcus followed her like a second skin, silent but always there. He did not speak. He only watched with eyes as sharp as blades. Clara felt like she was being stalked by a predator, waiting for her to slip so it could lunge. In the afternoon, while Clara was wiping down the second-floor hallway, she heard Vincent's voice carrying from his office. The door was not fully closed, leaving a narrow crack. Her heart began to race. Marcus had gone downstairs to the kitchen for water less than a minute earlier. This was her chance. Clara moved toward the door slowly, still holding the cleaning cloth as if she were simply doing her job. She stopped a few steps away and tilted her head, listening. "The Saturday night shipment cannot afford any mistakes." Vincent's voice came through, cool and commanding. "This is the biggest deal of the year. The location stays the South Port, as agreed. Double the guards." Clara felt as if her heart might burst out of her chest. The South Port, Saturday night. This was exactly what Derek needed. She had to hold on to every detail. She edged a little closer, straining to hear more. And at that moment, she felt warm breath against the back of her neck. Every hair on her body rose. "What do you need, Miss Bennett?" Marcus's voice spoke right behind her, low and cold as steel. Clara spun around, her heart nearly stopping. Marcus stood there less than a step away, black eyes fixed on her, cutting straight through her as if he could read every thought in her head. Vincent closed his office door after ending the call, but his mind was no longer on the Saturday night shipment. Clara's image from this morning would not leave him. Those green eyes filled with fear, the bruise on her cheekbone, the way she trembled when he moved closer. He had seen fear in countless eyes, enemies, rivals, traitors, but the fear in Clara's eyes was different. It was not fear of him. It was fear of something else, something tightening around her from the inside, choking her slowly. A knock pulled Vincent out of his thoughts. Marcus stepped in, a brown file folder in his hand. "The report on Clara Bennett, as you requested." Marcus said, setting the folder on the desk. "And one more thing. I caught her outside your office door this afternoon. She looked like she was eavesdropping on your call." Vincent lifted an eyebrow, but he did not look surprised. He had been suspicious since last night, since Clara vanished for the whole night and came back with an injury on her face. Something was wrong, and he would find it. "Keep watching," Vincent ordered. "Report every unusual move." Marcus nodded and left. Vincent sank into the leather chair, opened the folder, and began to read. The first pages held basic information he had already known when he hired Clara a year earlier. Clara Bennett, 27 years old, born in the suburbs of Detroit, orphaned at 16, no criminal record, a clean background. But the pages that followed made Vincent's gray eyes darken. Clara Bennett was not her real name. Her birth name was Clara Vance. Vance. The surname made Vincent clamp his jaw tight. Derek Vance. A mid-level drug dealer trying to expand in Chicago. The man who had been stirring up trouble on the South Side for the past year. Pushing at the edges of Romano territory, trying to seize transport routes that belonged to Vincent. He was a greedy sewer rat, not smart enough to build an empire of his own, but bold enough to try stealing someone else's. Vincent turned the next page, and what he read locked him in place. Clara had married Derek Vance 7 years earlier, when she was only 20. The marriage lasted 3 years before she filed for divorce. Court records showed multiple hospital admissions for accidents at home, a polite phrase Vincent knew too well. Broken ribs, head injuries, bruises everywhere. Derek Vance was a wife-beater, but what truly caught Vincent's attention was the line on the final page. Clara and Derek had a daughter named Lily, born 4 years ago, and according to the official record, the child had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, but there was no death certificate, no autopsy report, no cemetery listed any burial. This file was false. Vincent set the papers down, laced his hands together, and rested his chin on them, thinking, why would an ordinary maid have a past tied to a criminal like Derek Vance? Why would she change her identity and hide in the house of her ex-husband's greatest enemy? And where was the child who was supposed to be dead now? Pieces began to fit together in Vincent's mind. He remembered the way Clara sometimes stood silently outside the nursery on the 2nd floor, the room that had been left untouched since his sister died. He had caught her there more than once, those green eyes fixed on the dust-covered crib with a pain she could not hide. At the time, he had assumed she was only curious or sentimental about something. Now he understood. That was the look of a mother aching for her child. So was Clara a spy Derek planted in his house? Or was she a victim being controlled by that violent ex-husband? The bruise on her cheek, the fear in her eyes, the way she shook when he asked about last night, it all pointed in one direction. But Vincent was not a man who leapt to conclusions. He had survived in this world long enough to know appearances could lie. She could be a victim, but she could also be a talented actress trained by Derek to strike at his weak points. Whatever the truth was, he would find it. Vincent decided not to act yet. He would keep watching, let Clara believe she was not suspected, and wait for her to reveal herself. If she was a spy, he would handle her the way he handled every traitor. But if she was a victim, if Derek was using the child to force her. Vincent looked down at the photo in the file. Clara in the picture was younger, her hair longer, but her eyes were still jade green, still filled with a deep, quiet sadness. "What are you hiding from me, Clara?" he murmured to the photograph, his voice low in the silence of the empty room. The clock on the wall pointed to 2 a.m. when Clara slowly sat up in bed, her heart hammering wildly inside her chest. The room lay drowned in darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight slipping through the gap in the curtains. She had been tossing and turning for hours, unable to sleep with Lily's face haunting her mind. Where was her little girl? Was she hungry? Was she cold? Was she crying for her mother in the night? Clara reached for the phone hidden at the bottom of her suitcase, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the numbers. She had missed her meeting with Derek tonight because of Vincent's confinement order, and she knew he would be unhinged, but she needed to hear her daughter's voice. She needed to know Lily was still alive. She needed to tell Derek she had the information he wanted. The ring spilled out into the terrible silence. 1 ring, 2. Then the line picked up. "You dared not show up?" Derek's voice roared through the receiver, furious and dangerous. Clara could hear his heavy breathing over the phone, and she knew he was deep in rage. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, keeping her voice low enough that no one in the house would hear. "I'm not allowed out. Romano is suspicious after the other night. He has someone watching me 24 hours a day. I don't care. Derek hissed through clenched teeth. You promised you'd bring the information. You broke your promise. And you know what happens when you break your promise, don't you, Clara? Clara's heart seemed to stop. Derek, please. I have the information. The Saturday night shipment. At the Southport. I heard everything. Please. Let me talk to Lily. Silence held for a few seconds. Then Clara heard footsteps and the sound of a door opening. And after that came crying. Lily's crying. Mommy? Her child's voice, weak and trembling, came through the phone, shattering Clara's heart into a million pieces. Mommy, I'm scared. I want to go home. Lily, sweetheart. Clara choked out, tears spilling without control. Mommy's here. Mommy will come get you. I promise. I will. A slap cracked through, dry and merciless, cutting Clara's words in half. Then Lily's scream, the raw, wounded shriek of an innocent 4-year-old child being hurt. No! Clara screamed, forgetting she had to stay quiet. Derek, stop. Please, don't touch her. I'll do anything you want. Lily's sobs kept pouring through the phone, each broken breath like a knife driven into Clara's chest. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white, her whole body shaking beyond control. That's the price for your broken promise. Derek's voice came coldly after the child's crying. Next time you miss an appointment, I'll send you one of her fingers. Do you understand? I understand, Clara whispered, her voice splintering. Please, don't hurt her anymore. I'm begging you. You've got 36 hours, Derek said, his voice turning calm again in a way that was terrifying. Bring me the full details of the shipment, exact time, number of men, weapons, everything. And this time, don't you dare break your promise. The call ended, leaving Clara in a dead, airless silence. She let the phone fall onto the bed, covered her face with her hands, and cried. Not loud, not in a voice that could be heard, but the kind of silent crying that hurt 100 times worse, when the pain is too big to be turned into sound. Her shoulders shook in waves. Tears ran through her fingers and fell onto her thighs. Her daughter was being hit. Her daughter was crying for her mother, and Clara could do nothing. She was only a weak woman, trapped between a violent ex-husband and a powerful Mafia boss. No matter which side she chose, she would lose. No matter what she did, Lily would be hurt. Clara did not notice that her bedroom door had cracked open by a sliver. She did not see the shadow move past in the hallway, pausing for an instant when it caught the sound of her muffled sobbing. She did not know that Vincent Romano stood at the end of the dark corridor, his back against the wall, gray eyes fixed on her door with something in his expression no one could name. He had heard it all, not the words of the call, but her crying, the strangled sound she made in the night, enough for him to know that the small woman was carrying a monstrous pain. And even though his reason warned him she might be an enemy, his heart was tightening in a way he did not want to admit. The next morning, Clara walked into Vincent's office with swollen eyes and dark circles so deep they looked like bruises beneath her lashes. She had not slept after last night's call, Lily's crying still echoing in her head like a death song stuck on repeat. But she still had to work. She still had to act normal. She still had to find a way to get more information for Derek before he hurt her daughter again. Vincent's office was large and solemn, with oak bookshelves rising to the ceiling, an expensive mahogany desk, and classic paintings hanging on the walls. Clara began dusting the shelves, her hands moving on instinct while her mind was somewhere else. 36 hours left. No, now only about 30 hours. She had to find the exact time of the shipment, the number of men involved, the weapons they would carry. But how could she do that with Marcus watching her every minute? Lost in thought, Clara's hand accidentally brushed a small framed photograph on the shelf. The frame tipped and fell, striking the wooden floor with a sharp, dry crack that made her flinch. Clara hurriedly knelt to pick it up, and that was when she saw the person in the picture. A young woman, maybe only about 20, with long, glossy black hair and gray eyes exactly like Vincent's. The girl was smiling, bright and carefree, having no idea her life would end as tragically as it did. That's Isabella. The low voice made Clara jerk. She looked up and saw Vincent in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, gray eyes on her and the photograph in her hand with something she had never seen in him before. Pain, real pain, deep and uncovered. I'm sorry, Clara stammered, scrambling to her feet. I didn't mean to. I'll put it back right away. Vincent stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He walked toward Clara, and she unconsciously stepped back, but he did not stop until he was right in front of her. He gently took the frame from her hands, his thumb gliding over the glass as if he were touching the face in the picture. "My sister," Vincent said, his voice thick, as if every word carried an enormous weight. "She married a man the whole family trusted, a successful businessman, polished, handsome. No one knew that behind closed doors, he was a monster." Clara felt her heart tighten. She knew this story. She had lived this story. "Isabella hid it well," Vincent went on, his eyes still locked on the photo. "She covered the bruises with makeup. She lied about the hospital visits. She always said she was fine. And I believed her. I didn't see it." He fell silent for a moment, his jaw clenching so hard Clara could see the muscle tightening beneath his skin. "When I found out, it was too late. She died in the hospital, with internal injuries too severe to save her. He beat her to death, and I couldn't do anything to stop it." Clara felt tears rise, hot and immediate. She looked at Vincent, the most powerful and feared Mafia boss in Chicago, and she saw a brother breaking because he could not protect his sister. She saw a man carrying pain and guilt for 5 years. She saw a human being, not a monster. "I was too late to save her," Vincent said, his voice almost a whisper. He set the photo back on the shelf, and when he turned, his hand brushed Clara's hand by accident. They both went still, neither of them pulling away. Warmth from his palm spread into her skin, and Clara felt her heart change its rhythm in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Vincent looked straight into her eyes. The storm gray in them had softened now, holding something that was almost pleading. "If someone is hurting you, Clara," he said quietly, his voice low and sincere, "I need to know. I don't want to be too late again." Clara felt her confession rising in her throat. She wanted to tell him everything. About Derek, about Lily, about the hell she was living in. She wanted to believe the man in front of her could save her daughter. She parted her lips, ready to let the truth spill out, but just then, the phone hidden in the pocket of her apron vibrated. A message from Derek. Clara went rigid, the familiar fear sweeping away every trace of warmth she had just felt. She could not speak. She could not risk Lily's life. 12 hours. Clara had only 12 hours left before Derek carried out his threat. 12 hours before her daughter lost a finger. 12 hours before she became a complete failure as a mother. She lay on the bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in the dark, waiting. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, as if it were torturing her 1 second at a time. 11:30, 11:15, 11 o'clock. When the hands pointed to 2 in the morning, Clara knew it was time. She had watched the guards' patrol schedule for days. From 2 to 2:30 was the shift change, when the second-floor hallway was at its emptiest. Marcus had to sleep too, and she had seen the light in his room go out at midnight. Clara slid out of bed, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She wore an all-black set of pajamas to blend into the shadows, the phone hidden in her pocket. Her heart pounded like a war drum as she opened her door and leaned her head out to look. The hallway was empty, dark and still. Clara slipped out, kept close to the wall, and moved toward Vincent's office at the end of the corridor. Each step was light as a feather, but the thunder of her heartbeat was so loud she feared someone might hear it. The office door was not locked. Clara pushed gently. The door opened with a small creak that made her hold her breath. She waited 1 beat, 2 beats, and heard nothing else. She slid inside and closed the door behind her. The room was drowned in darkness, lit only by the weak moonlight filtering through the large window. Clara switched on her phone's flashlight, covering the beam with her palm so it would not be too bright. She moved to Vincent's desk, where she knew he kept important documents. The first drawer was full of legitimate business papers. The second held invoices and contracts. The third was locked. Clara bit her lip, pulled a hairpin from her head, and began to work the lock, a skill she had learned in the years she lived with Derek, when she needed to escape the rooms he trapped her in. A small click sounded. The drawer slid open, and Clara saw it. A file with the words "Saturday Shipment" printed in bold across the cover. Inside was everything she needed. The exact time, 2 in the morning on Sunday. The location, Pier 7 in the South District. The number of men involved, 20 armed men. A list of weapons and cargo. Everything Derek demanded was here, as if someone had laid it out for her. Clara did not have time to think about that strange coincidence. She only knew this was her chance to save Lily. Hands shaking, she pulled out her phone and began photographing each page. The flash flared in the darkness, page after page. Page 1, page 2, page 3. Her heart raced so fast she felt dizzy. Just a few more pages. Done. Clara shoved the phone back into her pocket, closed the drawer, and turned toward the door. She had done it. She would save Lily. Everything would be all right. The lights snapped on. Clara froze, her eyes not yet able to adjust to the sudden, blinding brightness, and when she saw who stood in the doorway, the blood in her veins turned to ice. Vincent Romano leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, storm gray, eyes cold as steel, watching her without blinking. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, as if he had been awake all night waiting for this moment. Looking for something? His voice was low and cold, each word like a stone dropped into a frozen lake. Clara opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She glanced at the drawer, then back at Vincent, and suddenly she understood. The drawer had not truly been locked. The papers were arranged too perfectly, too easy to find. No password, no security. This was a trap. Vincent had known. He had known from the beginning, and he had waited for her to fall into it. "I can explain," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Vincent stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock sounded like a death bell. "Then explain," he said, each step toward her like the footsteps of death. "Explain why my maid is stealing information at 2 a.m. Explain why you're connected to Derek Vance. Explain why you betrayed me." Clara felt her legs turn to water. He knew about Derek. He knew everything. She stood there in the middle of the room, the phone still in her pocket like proof she could not deny. And she knew there were no lies left that could save her now. Vincent moved toward Clara, with steps that were slow and heavy with threat. She backed up until her spine met the edge of his desk, with nowhere left to run. He stopped right in front of her, ice-cold gray eyes looking down at her with something she could not decipher. Disappointment, anger, or the sharp sting of betrayal. "The phone," he said, his voice low and final. "Give it to me." Clara's hands trembled as she pulled the phone from her pocket and placed it into his outstretched palm. She had no strength left to resist, no lies left to shield herself. Everything was over. Vincent turned the phone on, and Clara watched his face darken as he read the messages between her and Derek. The threats, the demands for information, the images of Lily tied up in a dark room. His jaw tightened until the muscle jumped beneath his skin, and his other hand curled into a fist so hard it went white. When he lifted his gaze to her, the gray in his eyes had deepened, like a sky before a storm. "Explain," he said, a single word that held an ultimatum. Clara felt her knees give out. She could not stand anymore. She slid to the floor, her back against the desk leg, and the tears she had been holding back for so long finally broke loose. "Derek is my ex-husband," she began, her voice splintering between sobs. "I married him when I was 20. I thought he loved me. I thought he would protect me. But I was wrong." Clara drew in a shaking breath, the painful memories rushing back like floodwater. "He started hitting me right after the wedding. At first it was only slaps when I didn't please him. Then it became punches. Then it became the times I ended up in the hospital and lied to the doctors that I fell down the stairs." She stared down at her trembling hands in her lap, thin fingers that had been broken many times. "I had Lily in that marriage. She was the only thing that kept me alive. When Lily was one, I ran. I changed my name, changed cities, cut every tie. I thought I had escaped." Tears streamed down her face and dripped onto the sleeve of her black pajamas. "But 6 months ago, Derek found me. He kidnapped Lily, used her as a hostage to force me to work for him. He wanted information about you, about your empire. He wanted to bring you down and take Chicago." Clara looked up at Vincent, green eyes full of desperation and pleading. "He said if I didn't bring him information, he would kill Lily. He made me listen to her crying, to him hitting her through the phone. I had no choice. I had to do it. I had to save my child." She choked, unable to say anything more. Her sobs tore at her throat, her whole body shaking like a leaf in a storm. She had confessed everything. She had betrayed the most powerful man in Chicago, and now she was waiting for her death sentence. Vincent stayed silent the entire time she spoke. He stood there like stone, only the tight, whitening fist showing that he felt anything at all. When Clara finished, he still did not speak, and that silence was more frightening than any rage. "I know you might kill me," Clara whispered, her voice no more than a thin breath, "and I accept that. But please, my daughter is innocent. Lily is only 4. She has nothing to do with this. Please, if you have even a little mercy, save her. Get her away from Derek." She bowed her head, too drained to look at him anymore. She had begged. She had placed her daughter's life in the hands of an enemy. She had nothing left to lose. Footsteps sounded, and then Clara felt a hand lift her chin gently. She looked up, startled to see Vincent had crouched down to her level, gray eyes holding hers. The coldness was gone. The anger was gone. In its place was something she did not dare believe was real. Understanding, compassion, and maybe, just maybe, concern. "I will bring her home," Vincent said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "I will find Lily, and bring her back to you." Clara blinked, not trusting what she had just heard. "What?" "You heard me," Vincent said, his thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. "I will save your daughter." "Why?" Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "Why would you help me? I betrayed you. I spied for your enemy. You don't owe me anything." Vincent was silent for a moment, his eyes darkening with painful memory. Then he spoke, his voice so low it sounded like he was speaking more to himself than to her. "Because I was too late once before. I will not let that happen again." Vincent stood, his face settling back into its familiar coldness. Yet his eyes still held a trace of warmth as he looked down at Clara. He offered his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Clara took it and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs were still shaking, and he kept hold of her a little longer, steadying her until she could balance again. "Sit down," Vincent said gently, guiding her to the leather sofa in the corner of the room. "You need to breathe. You need to calm down." Clara sat, her hands still trembling in her lap. She watched Vincent walk to the door and open it, where Marcus was already waiting outside as if he had known he would be summoned. "Come in," Vincent ordered. Marcus stepped inside, his sharp gaze flicking over Clara for a heartbeat before settling on his boss. If he was surprised to see her sitting here instead of dead on the floor, he did not show it. "I need everything we have on Derek Vance within 24 hours, Vincent said, his voice returning to the cold, commanding authority of a Mafia boss. "Where he operates, how many men he has, what weapons he's sitting on, and most important, where he's holding a 4-year-old girl named Lily." Marcus lifted an eyebrow, and it might have been the first time Clara had ever seen him show any emotion at all. "A child, sir." "Clara's daughter," Vincent said, jerking his head toward her. "Derek is using the girl to blackmail her. I want the location, and I want that child brought home safely." Marcus nodded without asking another question. "I'll contact our sources immediately. Anything else, sir?" "Not yet. Go." Marcus left, closing the door behind him. Silence settled over the room, and Clara felt she had to say something. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice still rough from crying too much. "I betrayed you. I spied for your enemy. You have every right to be angry, every right to punish me. Why are you helping?" Vincent turned to her, gray eyes deep as an ocean under storm clouds. He was quiet for a moment, as if weighing how much to say. Then he walked over and sat beside her on the sofa, leaving a careful distance, not too close, not too far. "Do you remember what I told you about Isabella?" he asked, his voice low. Clara nodded, the image of the young woman with black hair in the framed photograph rising in her mind. "My sister died because of a man like Derek," Vincent went on, his jaw tightening. "A man who thinks he has the right to control a woman with violence. A man who turns the life of the woman he swore to love into a living hell. I couldn't save Isabella, but I swore at her grave that I would not let men like that exist in my world." He looked straight into Clara's eyes, and she saw the fire of hatred burning in the storm gray. "Men like Derek don't deserve to breathe the same air as decent people, and I'm going to make sure he understands that." Warmth spread through Clara's chest in a slow wave. She had once believed Vincent Romano was a monster, a ruthless Mafia boss who did not know mercy, but now she saw a person, a brother carrying the wound of losing his sister, a man with his own rules, his own lines he would not cross. "And there's one more reason," Vincent said, his voice softening just a little. He lifted a hand and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and Clara felt her skin flush where his fingers grazed her. "I don't let anyone hurt what's mine." Clara looked up at him, green eyes widening. "What's yours?" "You've been in my house for a year," Vincent said, his gaze locked on hers. "You're part of my world, whether you want to be or not, and I protect what belongs to me." Clara's heart stumbled in her chest. She did not know how to take that. Did he see her as property? Or something more? But before she could think, Vincent took her hand, his large, warm palm closing around her small, trembling fingers. "Trust me," he said, and it sounded like a question and a promise at the same time. "Can you do that?" Clara searched his storm-gray eyes for deceit, manipulation, any sign that she was being used, but she found nothing except sincerity and iron resolve. "I trust you," she whispered, and for the first time in 6 months, she truly meant it. Vincent nodded, gave her hand a gentle squeeze once, then stood. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed, his eyes returning to the hard, cold focus of a Mafia boss preparing for war. "Gather everyone," he said into the phone, his voice sharp as steel. "We've got a rat to hunt." Vincent's office felt cramped when 5 men walked in the next morning. Clara sat at the corner of the sofa, feeling like a small fish thrown into a tank of sharks. These men were all tall and solid, with cold eyes and scars on their faces that said they were no strangers to violence. Marcus stood to Vincent's right, a tablet in his hand. The other 4 lined up, silent, waiting for orders from their boss. Vincent stood behind his desk, both hands braced on the wood, gray eyes sweeping over each man in turn. "Our target is Derek Vance," he began, his voice cold and absolute. "He is holding a 4-year-old child to extort someone. Our job is to find where he's keeping the girl and bring her home safely." He tipped his head toward Clara. "This is Clara Bennett. She is the child's mother, and she will play an important role in this plan." The sharp, hard stares turned toward Clara, and she felt herself wanting to shrink, but she lifted her chin and refused to let them see fear. She was doing this for Lily. She could endure a few judging eyes. "Here's the tactic," Vincent continued. "Clara will contact Derek and set a meeting to hand over false information. When she meets him, we will watch from a distance. The goal is not to grab Derek immediately, but to let him lead us to where he's holding the child." Marcus stepped forward, activated the tablet, and projected a map onto the large screen on the wall. "According to our sources, Derek is operating mainly on the south side. There's an abandoned warehouse here," he pointed to a spot on the map, "that we suspect he's using as a base, but we have not confirmed whether the child is there." "Then we confirm it," Vincent said. "Clara will be the bait. When Derek believes she's cooperating, he'll drop his guard. That's when we move in." Clara rose, unable to sit still anymore. "I want to be directly involved in the operation." Vincent turned to her, his eyes darkening. "No, that's my daughter," Clara said, her voice firmer than she expected. "I have the right to be there when you find her." "It's too dangerous," Vincent said, his tone not bending. "You're not trained to fight. You'll be a burden to my team." The words hit Clara like a slap, but she did not back down. "I don't need you to protect me. I need to be with my daughter when she's rescued. Lily hasn't seen her mother for 6 months. She'll be terrified. She needs me." They stared at each other, neither willing to yield. The room went so quiet Clara could hear every man's breathing. Finally, Marcus spoke. "We could put her in the armored vehicle," he suggested. "Park it at a distance from the action, but close enough that she can come the moment we secure the area." Vincent stayed silent, weighing it, his jaw tight. Then he let out a breath, reluctant. "Fine. You ride in the vehicle. You do not step out until I personally come for you. You promise me that?" Clara nodded, relief flooding her. "I promise." Vincent studied her for another moment, as if trying to decide whether she would truly keep her word. Then he turned back to his men. "Get everything ready. We move tomorrow night." He looked at Clara, gray eyes holding an unspoken vow. "Tomorrow night, we end this." Clara could not sleep. She lay twisting in the sheets for hours, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would face Derek again after 6 months of hell. Tomorrow, she might hold Lily in her arms for the first time since her little girl was taken. Or tomorrow, everything could shatter beyond repair. At last, she gave up on sleep and slid out of bed. She pulled on a thin cardigan and stepped out of her room, bare feet gliding across the cool wooden floor. She did not know where she was going until she found herself in front of the glass door that led to the large second-floor balcony. Moonlight poured through the panes, painting silver streaks across the floor. Clara pushed the door open and stepped outside, and that was when she saw him. Vincent stood with his back against the balcony railing, a half-burned cigar in his hand, his gaze fixed on the Chicago skyline at night. City lights glittered in the distance like millions of stars fallen to the earth. He did not turn when he heard her, as if he had known she would come. Can't sleep either?" he asked, his low voice blending with the cool night wind. Clara walked over to stand beside him, leaning on the railing. "My mind won't settle. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about Lily, about everything that could go wrong." Vincent nodded, brought the cigar to his mouth, drew in, then let the smoke drift out. The scent of expensive Cuban tobacco lingered in the air, mixed with the Chicago night and the familiar sandalwood of his cologne. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," Clara admitted, "but not for myself. I'm afraid for Lily. I'm afraid I'll get there and she won't be there anymore." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his eyes still on the distance. Then he said, so softly it was almost carried away by the wind, "You're a good mother, Clara. You've done everything you can to protect your child, even if it meant standing against me." Clara let out a small laugh, sad and thin. "I betrayed you. That's not the definition of good." "You betrayed me to save your daughter," Vincent said. And for the first time he turned to look at her. His gray eyes were deep in the moonlight, holding something she could not name. "I respect that more than blind loyalty." They stood in silence for a while, two figures side by side in the night. For the first time since they met, there was no threat, no secrets, no distance between a boss and a maid. Only two people standing together, waiting for a tomorrow no one could see. "After this," Clara said at last, her voice as light as breath, "what happens to me?" Vincent looked at her, waiting. "I mean, after Lily is rescued, what will I do? Where will I go?" "Anywhere you want," Vincent answered. "You'll be free. You can leave, start a new life somewhere else. I'll provide you with money and new papers if you need them." Clara lowered her gaze, looking at her hands gripping the railing. Free. She had dreamed of freedom for 6 months, but now, with it laid out in front of her, she was not sure she wanted it anymore. "What if I don't want to leave?" she whispered, not daring to look at him. Silence. Clara could hear her heartbeat in her ears, one beat after another, like a countdown to something she could not take back. Then she felt the warmth of his hand as Vincent gently placed his fingers under her chin, tipping her face up to meet his eyes. The storm gray there was deep as a midnight ocean now, holding a low, smoldering fire she had never seen before. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, and Clara felt heat bloom where he touched her. He leaned toward her, and she realized she was leaning toward him, too. The space between them narrowed, inches, centimeters. She could feel his warm breath ghost across her mouth, the taste of Cuban tobacco and sandalwood in it. Her heart went wild. This was madness. This was wrong. He was a mafia boss. She was the woman who had betrayed him. But she could not stop. She did not want to stop. But Vincent stopped. One breath away from their mouths meeting, he closed his eyes, drew in a deep breath as if forcing himself under control, and stepped back. "Go to bed," he said, his voice rough. "You're going to need your strength for tomorrow." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Clara alone on the balcony, her lips still trembling from a kiss that never happened. She lifted a hand to her chest, felt her heart beating out of rhythm, and realized with a terrifying clarity that she was falling for the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. The underground parking garage beneath the South Side Shopping Center was cold and damp at 8 in the evening. Flickering fluorescent lights on the ceiling threw alternating bands of brightness and shadow, like a ghostly checkerboard. Clara stood alone beside a concrete pillar, her heart galloping in her chest, her hands clenched around the small USB drive in her coat pocket. She knew Vincent's team was watching from a distance. A black van was parked on the level above, with Marcus and 2 others inside, surrounded by monitoring equipment. In her ear was a tiny earpiece, nearly invisible, so Vincent could hear everything that was happening. But even knowing she was not completely alone, Clara still felt as if she were standing on the edge of hell. Footsteps sounded behind her, and Clara turned. Derek Vance stepped out of the darkness, his face just as she remembered, sharp and handsome in a dangerous way, but his eyes cold as a snake's. He wore a black leather jacket, his hands in his pockets, a contemptuous half-smile on his lips. "Long time no see, my former wife," Derek said, his voice sweet with fakery. "I thought you were going to run for good." Before Clara could react, Derek lunged forward and grabbed her hair, yanking her head back hard. Pain stole her breath, her eyes burning as her scalp tightened under his grip. "You know I hate waiting," Derek hissed into her ear. "You made me wait too long, Clara. I had to teach the little girl a lesson in your place." Clara's heart felt squeezed in a fist. Lily. What had her child endured because Clara was late? "I have the information," Clara said, forcing her voice not to shake. Everything you want. Please. Let go of me. Derek stared at her for a moment, then released her. Clara stumbled back, one hand going up to rub her throbbing scalp. She pulled the USB drive from her pocket and held it out to him, her hands trembling slightly as she fought to control them. Derek took the USB drive, rolling it between his fingers, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "How did you get this so easily?" he asked, his tone sharp as ice. "You've been in Romano's house for a whole year, and you only brought back worthless crap, and now suddenly you've got the full details on his biggest shipment of the year. You think I'm that stupid?" Cold sweat broke out along Clara's back. She had prepared for this question, had rehearsed the answer with Vincent all through the night before, but facing Derek, with those venomous eyes drilling into her, everything became so much harder. "I seduced one of Romano's guards," she said, working to keep her voice calm. "A guy named Leo. He's wanted me for a long time, and I used that. Men are always stupid when they think with what's below instead of what's in their heads." Derek stared at her, measuring her. Then he laughed, a rough, contempt-filled sound. "So you know how to use what you've got to do the job," he said, stuffing the USB drive into his pocket. "Good. If this information is accurate, you get to see the girl. If not..." He did not need to finish. Clara knew the consequence. Just then, another figure stepped out of the shadows. Clara went rigid when she saw who it was. The man was younger than Derek by a few years, but he had the same cold eyes and the same angular face. Tony Vance, Derek's younger brother. Clara had heard of Tony, the one people said was even more ruthless than his brother. He looked at Clara with a gaze that made her feel sick, as if she were meat hanging in a shop window. "So this is your former wife?" Tony asked, licking his lips. "You were right. She's pretty tasty." Clara felt nausea rise, but she kept her face blank. Tony stepped up beside Derek and tilted his head, whispering something into his brother's ear. Derek listened, his eyes flickering, then nodded. "All right," Derek said to Clara. "You can go. I'll check this. If everything's good, I'll contact you." Clara did not need to be told twice. She turned and walked away, forcing herself not to run, forcing her steps to stay even while every cell in her body screamed at her to sprint as far from this place as possible. She did not look back. She did not see Tony lingering in the darkness, snake-cold eyes tracking her every step with a vicious smile on his mouth. He left the garage in another direction, silent as a shadow, following the car that came to pick Clara up from a safe distance. Derek stood in the warehouse's dark room, the only light a ceiling bulb that flickered as if it were about to die. He rolled the USB drive in his hand, eyes fixed on it, thoughtful. Everything was too smooth. Clara had gotten the information too easily. And the way she had looked at him was no longer the pure, absolute fear of before, but something else, something that looked like hope. Footsteps sounded, and Tony came in, his face gone hard. "Brother, we've got a problem." Derek lifted an eyebrow. "Talk." "I tailed your former wife after she left the parking garage," Tony said, his voice keyed up. "There was a black van parked on the level above the whole time you met her, and when she left, another car came to pick her up, and the license plate belongs to a company I traced as one of Romano's front businesses." Derek went still as stone, his jaw tightening. Then, without warning, he turned and hurled the USB drive at the wall with all his strength. Plastic shattered, fragments spraying everywhere. "Bitch!" Derek roared, his voice echoing through the empty warehouse. He grabbed the nearest chair and slammed it into the wall, again and again, until the chair broke into pieces in his hands. She dared to betray me. She dared to run to Romano. Tony stood frozen, not daring to step into his brother's fury. He had seen Derek like this before, and he knew it was best to let him burn himself out. Derek smashed a few more things, overturned a table, kicked cartons across the floor, until the rage slowly ebbed. Then he stood in the wreckage, breathing hard. But when he turned to Tony, his eyes were ice, calm, calculating. That was the Derek Tony feared most. "So the little thing wants to play games," Derek said, his voice now low and steady in a way that was terrifying. "Fine, we'll play." He pulled out his phone and started making calls, one after another, calling allies, hired guns, anyone who still owed him. Within 1 hour, he had gathered a force 3 times the size of what he usually kept. "Romano thinks he can come here and steal what's mine," Derek said to Tony when the last call ended. "He's going to learn a lesson." He stepped closer, set a hand on Tony's shoulder, and looked him straight in the eye. "You watch the little girl." If Romano and his men show up, you know what to do. Tony licked his lips, a sick smile spreading across his face. You want me to kill her? Kill her in front of her mother, Derek said, his voice without a shred of feeling. Let that bitch watch her daughter die before I deal with both of them. Meanwhile, Clara sat in Vincent's car on the way back to the Romano estate, but she could not shake the unease gnawing at her. Something was wrong. She did not know what, but a mother's instinct was screaming that something was coming. Vincent, she said, with him beside her, her voice trembling slightly. I have a bad feeling. Derek believed me too easily. He's not the kind of man you fool that fast. Vincent looked at her, gray eyes deep in the darkness of the car. You're right to worry, but we've prepared for every scenario. He took out his phone and called Marcus. Double the men. I want reserves ready within a radius of 1 mile around the target. If there's any sign this is a trap, we pull out immediately. Clara heard Marcus answer through the phone, but she did not feel any calmer. Lily's image kept rising in her mind. Green eyes like Clara's full of fear. That small voice saying, Mommy, through the phone. If anything happened to her, Clara would never forgive herself. Hours later, Vincent's convoy moved through the night toward the south side. 3 black SUVs slid through empty streets, headlights off to avoid being seen. Clara sat in the middle vehicle, Vincent beside her, her hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. She did not know that ahead of them, in the warehouse's dark room, Derek was waiting with an army and a cruel plan. She did not know her daughter was being guarded by Tony, under orders to kill without hesitation if anything went wrong. They were driving straight into a trap. The abandoned warehouse sat at the end of a dark alley on the south side, surrounded by crumbling buildings and empty lots drowned in trash. The convoy stopped about 200 meters away, engines and lights cut, swallowed by the Chicago night. Clara sat in the armored vehicle in the middle of the line, her hands clenched on her thighs until her knuckles went white. Her heart beat like a war drum, each thud echoing in her ears like a countdown to something inevitable. Vincent sat beside her, checking his gun one last time before they moved. He wore a bulletproof vest beneath his black jacket, his face hard and focused. When he finished, he turned to Clara. You remember what I told you? He asked quietly. You stay in the vehicle. You do not step out no matter what happens. The doors are locked from the outside, and only Marcus or I can open them. Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. She wanted to tell him to be careful, to tell him to come back alive, to tell him that but she could not. Not now. Vincent lifted a hand and brushed her cheek gently. I'm bringing Lily back, he said, his voice softening just a shade. I promise. Then he opened the door and stepped out, disappearing into the darkness with his men. Through the glass, Clara watched black shapes move like ghosts across the night. Marcus led one group around to the back of the warehouse, while Vincent led another toward the front. The earpiece in her ear carried their murmurs, brief and professional commands. Alpha, moving into position. Bravo ready at the back door. Confirm 2 guards at the main gate. Neutralized. Prepare to breach in 3, 2, 1. And then hell broke open. Gunfire exploded. Not 1 or 2 shots, but dozens, hundreds, a relentless ripping that tore the night apart. Clara flinched hard, instinct making her duck even inside the armored car. Through the glass she saw sparks flashing near the warehouse, white streaks of bullets cutting through the dark. Ambush! It's a trap! Marcus shouted into the earpiece, his voice chaotic and edged with fear. Too many. Way too many. At least twice what we planned for. The gunfire kept pounding, mixed with screaming and the crash of breaking glass. Clara heard men calling out, heard groans of pain, heard someone yell, Man down, need backup. She tried to open the vehicle door, shoving with both hands, but it would not move. Vincent had locked her inside like a bird in a cage. She could not get out. She could not help. She could only sit here and listen to the men fighting for her daughter fall one by one. Vincent! Clara cried into the earpiece, panic strangling her voice. Vincent, where are you? Can you hear me? Static. Gunfire. Then Vincent's voice, broken and tight. Clara, stay in the car. Don't. And then, the signal died. Nothing but white noise in her ear. Clara yanked the earpiece out, her heart battering against her ribs. She stared through the glass, and what she saw turned her blood to ice. Fire. Part of the warehouse was burning, orange flames licking up into the night sky. Figures ran back and forth in the firelight, impossible to tell apart. The gunfire continued, but now it sounded farther away, as if the fight had moved inside the building. Then silence. A sudden silence, more terrifying than the shots. No more bursts, no more screams, only the crackle of fire and the night wind moving across the vacant lot. Clara sat there, numb, her eyes fixed on the chaos ahead. She did not know who had won. She did not know who was still alive. She did not know if Vincent was still breathing, or lying somewhere in that wreckage with blood spilling from a wound she could not see. Tears ran down her cheeks without her noticing. She only sat there in the cold, armored vehicle, praying to any god that might be listening that Vincent was alive, that Lily was alive, that tonight would not take everyone she loved. But no one answered. There was only the terrible silence, and the fire that seemed to be burning away every last piece of her hope. Inside the warehouse was a living hell. Gunsmoke hung thick enough to burn the eyes, and the air reeked of powder and hot, metallic blood. Vincent drove forward through the hail of bullets, the gun in his hand roaring without pause as he dropped enemy after enemy who tried to block his path. A round grazed his left shoulder, ripping cloth and slicing into flesh. He gritted his teeth through the pain, never slowing even as blood soaked his sleeve. Around him, men on both sides went down like dominoes. Gunshots, screams, and ragged moans fused into a single symphony of violence and death. One of Derek's men sprang from behind a crate, but Vincent was faster. 2 shots to the chest, sending him flat onto the floor. Marcus appeared at Vincent's side, his face smeared with soot, a cut on his forehead leaking blood. "Boss, we've got the first floor under control, but we took heavy losses. 4 of our men are down." Vincent nodded, eyes sweeping the half-burning warehouse. "Where's the girl? Has anyone seen the child?" "Not yet. We're searching, but we haven't found her." They pushed deeper, stepping over bodies and rubble. Vincent kicked a door open, gun raised and ready, but the room beyond was empty. The next room was the same, and the next. No Lily, no sign of a child at all. A knot of dread tightened in Vincent's chest. A low groan came from the corner. Vincent swung his gun that way, and saw Tony Vance slumped beside a cargo crate, one hand clamped over his stomach, where blood seeped through his fingers. He had been shot, but was not dead. Vincent strode up, planted his boot on Tony's chest, and aimed the gun at his face. "Where is the girl?" he snarled, his voice cold as ice. Tony sneered, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. "You think you've won, Romano?" "I'm not asking twice." Vincent pressed down harder, and Tony hissed in pain. "The child, where?" Tony coughed up a mouthful of blood, but the sick smile stayed on his face. My brother moved her last night. She was never here. You rushed in like moths into a flame, and now." He broke off, eyes sliding toward the doorway with triumph. The roar of a truck engine thundered outside, tearing through the night. Vincent snapped around, and what he saw turned his blood to ice. A large truck slammed straight through the warehouse gate, crushing everything in its path. Dozens of gunmen jumped down from it, weapons already up and ready, and standing on the truck bed, like a dark king on his throne, was Derek Vance. He wore body armor, a handgun in his grip, and he yanked a small figure close beside him. Lily, the child, was thin and filthy, blonde hair snarled into tangles, green eyes wide with terror. Derek's fist locked around her neck, and the muzzle of his gun was pressed to the temple of that 4-year-old child. "Romano!" Derek roared, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "Surprised? You think you can come here and take what's mine? You think you can play this game with me?" Vincent stood frozen, his eyes locked on Lily. She was crying, tears cutting tracks down her dirty cheeks, her lips moving as if to say, "Mommy." But no sound came. Rage flared in Vincent's chest like a volcano, but he knew he could not move too fast. One mistake, and the child would die. "Drop your gun," Derek ordered, tightening his grip on Lily's throat. She screamed in pain. "All of you, drop your weapons right now, or watch this kid's brains splatter across the floor." Marcus looked to Vincent, waiting for an order. The remaining men did the same, guns still raised but no one daring to fire. Vincent looked into Lily's eyes, an innocent child trembling in the hands of a devil. He thought of Isabella, his sister, the one he had not been able to save. He thought of Clara, waiting for news in the vehicle outside, putting her whole faith in him. He could not fail again. He could not let an innocent child die in front of him. Vincent lowered his gun, set it on the floor, and raised both hands. "All right," he said, his voice frighteningly calm. "You win, Derek. Let the girl go." Derek laughed, a mad sound bouncing off the warehouse walls. "You think it's that simple? No, Romano. Tonight you die. And my former wife is going to watch her daughter die before I deal with her too. Clara could not wait any longer. When the gunfire cut off and that terrible silence settled over everything, she knew something horrifying was happening. She looked around the vehicle, searching for anything that could get her out. Under the front seat, she found an emergency glass breaker hammer. Without hesitating, Clara grabbed it and swung hard at the side window. The first strike only cracked it. The second sent the fractures spreading like spiderwebs. The third blow burst the glass apart, spilling into sharp, glittering pieces. She swept away what remained with her sleeve and climbed out. Not caring about the small cuts along her arm, she ran toward the warehouse, her heart trying to leap out of her chest. Flames still licked at one corner of the building, but the back door seemed untouched. Clara slipped through a half-open metal door and stepped inside into darkness and smoke. Voices reached her, and she followed them, threading past crates and rubble. When she peered out from behind a concrete pillar, her heart seemed to stop. Vincent was on one knee on the floor, both hands raised above his head, gray eyes locked on Derek, and Derek was there, one hand clamped around Lily's neck, the other holding a gun to her head. Her daughter was thin and filthy, but alive. Lily was alive. Tears rushed up in Clara's eyes, and then Lily saw her. Those green eyes, the same as her mother's, went wide, and the child screamed, her voice raw from crying too much. "Mommy, Mommy." Every head in the room turned toward Clara. Derek turned, and when he saw her standing there, a mad smile spread across his mouth. "Perfect timing, you bitch," he said, his voice thick with pleasure. "I was about to send someone to find you, but you coming on your own is even better." Clara stood there trembling, but she did not step back. Her eyes stayed on Lily, on the little girl she had not held for 6 months. Derek jerked Lily closer, tightening his grip on the child's throat. "You know what, Clara? I've been thinking and thinking about how to punish you for betraying me, and I came up with a really good idea." He looked over at Vincent, the vicious smile never leaving his lips. "Romano, you're going to be the one who kills my former wife, with your own hands. If you don't, I'll shoot the kid right in front of her." Vincent ground his teeth, hatred burning in his gaze at Derek. "You're insane." "Maybe," Derek admitted, "but you're still going to do it. Because you're a man of principles, aren't you, Romano? You don't let kids die." He tossed Vincent's gun onto the floor in front of him. "Pick it up. Shoot that bitch. Or watch this little girl die." Clara looked at Vincent, and he looked back at her. In those storm-gray eyes she saw pain, helplessness, and an apology that never made a sound. But Clara did not need him to do anything. She had her own plan. Without waiting a single second, Clara rushed straight at Derek. She did not think about consequences, did not think about danger. She thought only of Lily, of getting her child out of the devil's hands. Derek did not react in time when Clara slammed into him. She clawed and struck and fought with everything a desperate mother had left. "Run, Lily," she screamed. "Run, baby." Lily slipped free when Derek was knocked off balance by the sudden attack. The child stumbled as she ran, fell, then got up again and ran toward Vincent, who reached out for her. Derek roared with rage and drove a fist straight into Clara's face. The blow was so hard she crashed backward onto the floor, her head striking concrete, her vision bursting with pain. He stood over her, eyes bloodshot with hatred, the gun aimed straight at her face. "You're going to die for this," Derek screamed, but he did not get to pull the trigger. Vincent had drawn a small pistol hidden at his ankle, and before anyone could react, he fired. The bullet tore through Derek's shoulder, making him howl and stumble back, the gun falling from his hand. Behind him, Tony dragged himself up from where he had been down, lifting his gun to shoot Clara. But Marcus was faster. 2 shots cracked, and Tony went down, this time never rising again. Derek dropped to his knees, one hand clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with pain and fury. He stared at Clara with pure hatred. "You're going to regret this." "No," Vincent said, stepping in and kicking him face down onto the floor. "You're the one who's going to regret it." And in that moment, amid blood and fire and bodies, Lily ran to Clara. "Mommy," she sobbed, throwing herself into her mother's arms. Clara wrapped her daughter tight, tears pouring like rain. She did not feel the pain, even though blood was running from her head. She felt only Lily's warmth in her arms, the familiar scent of her hair, even though it was dirty and tangled. Her daughter was home. Derek lay face down on the concrete floor, his hands cuffed behind his back by Marcus, blood from the wound in his shoulder still spilling into a dark red pool. He groaned and spat curses, but he no longer had the strength to fight. Tony lay motionless a few yards away, eyes wide open, staring up at the warehouse ceiling and seeing nothing. A fitting death for a man willing to kill a 4-year-old child. But Clara saw nothing except Lily. She held her daughter so tightly she was afraid she might crush that small body, and yet she could not let go. 6 months. 6 months she had only heard her child's voice through a phone, only seen her through the short videos Derek allowed. 6 months living in hell, not knowing whether her daughter had enough to eat, whether she slept in peace, whether she was being hit the way Clara had once been hit, and now Lily was in her arms. Real, warm, alive. "Mommy's here, sweetheart," Clara whispered into Lily's hair, her voice breaking between sobs. "Mommy's here. I'm right here. I will never let anyone take you away again. Never," Lily cried without stopping, small hiccuping sobs that tore Clara's heart apart. The child was so much thinner now. Clara could feel ribs standing out beneath the dirty, thin shirt. The once golden hair was tangled and brittle. Those green eyes, so like her mother's, were now haunted by a fear no 4-year-old should ever have to know. But she was alive. Lily was alive, and that was all that mattered. "Mommy, I was so scared," Lily whispered, her little voice hoarse. "They said I would never see you again. I thought I had to stay there forever." "No, baby," Clara said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No one can take you from me. I will always find you. Always." A shadow dropped beside them, and Clara looked up. Vincent was there, his face smeared with blood and grit, the injury on his shoulder still seeping through his shirt. But his storm-gray eyes had softened, warm in a way she had never seen before. He knelt beside Clara and Lily, moving slowly so he would not frighten the child. "Hello there, little one," he said gently, his voice so low and tender Clara almost did not recognize it. "I'm Vincent. I'm your mother's friend. You're safe now. No one can hurt you anymore." Lily watched him with cautious green eyes, still trembling in her mother's arms. She had been through too much, hurt too many times by frightening men. Clara was ready for Lily to be afraid, ready to protect her from anyone, even Vincent. But what happened next stunned her. Lily studied Vincent for a long moment, as if weighing him. Then, suddenly, she let go of Clara's neck and reached for Vincent, small arms sliding around his neck. Vincent went rigid, clearly not expecting this. He looked at Clara, baffled, as if he did not know what to do with a child clinging to him. Clara smiled through tears and gave a small nod. Then Vincent lifted his arms and held Lily, his large frame wrapped around her with a careful gentleness, as if he feared he might break something precious. Clara watched, and her heart filled with a feeling she could not name. The most powerful Mafia boss in Chicago was holding her daughter with a tenderness she had never imagined he possessed. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Marcus had called for medical backup before the fight was even over. Vehicles with red lights flashing poured into the warehouse lot, medics jumping out with stretchers and emergency bags. Vincent rose, still holding Lily, and offered his other hand to Clara. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. Her head still throbbed, and she could feel dried blood stiff in her hair, but she did not care. They walked out of the warehouse, out of the hell they had fought to survive. Behind them, Derek was dragged away by Vincent's men, a wordless sentence waiting for him, and ahead of them, the ambulance lights spilled across the road, lighting the path that would carry them home. 3 days passed like a dream. Clara sat in the armchair beside Lily's bed, watching her daughter sleep in a room that had been newly redone. Vincent had people repainted a pale pink, bought a princess bed with white lace canopy curtains, and filled the shelves with stuffed animals. Everything was new, everything was clean, everything was safe. Lily was already much better after 3 days of steady care. Color had returned to her cheeks, and last night was the first night she slept all the way through without a nightmare. Vincent's private doctor came each day, making sure there were no serious physical injuries. The bruises on Lily's wrists, where the rope had rubbed, were slowly healing, but the wounds inside her would take much longer. Clara smoothed her daughter's blonde hair, still unable to believe it was over. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night in a panic, sure it had all been a dream, sure Lily was still in Derek's hands. Then she would look to the bed, see her child sleeping peacefully, and tears would spill again, this time from relief. A soft knock sounded, and Rosa came in with a tray of tea. The older cook set it down on the small table beside Clara, warm brown eyes lowering to Lily's sleeping face. "She sleeps so well," Rosa whispered. "A little angel." Clara managed a tired smile, and took the cup from Rosa's hand. "Thank you." Rosa sat beside her and stayed quiet for a moment before speaking softly. "He hasn't slept much these past nights. He stays in his office until morning. I saw him sitting by the window with a glass in his hand." Clara lowered her gaze to the tea. She knew Rosa meant Vincent. She also knew he was dealing with what came after that night. Derek Vance had been handed over to Vincent's people, and Clara did not need to ask to know he would never be a threat to anyone again. Part of her recoiled at the cruelty of this world, but another part, the mother who had listened to her child being hurt, felt a strange calm. Derek would never touch Lily again. That was all that mattered. When Rosa left, Clara sat alone in the silence, her mind spinning with thoughts of the future. What was she supposed to do now? She was no longer Vincent's maid. Not in the usual sense. She had betrayed him, even if she had reasons. She had lied to him for nearly a year, stolen his information, nearly gotten him killed. Could he truly forgive her? Could she stay here, in this house, beside this man? Or should she take his money and leave? Begin a new life somewhere else with Lily? Another knock came. This time Marcus. "The boss wants to see you in his office," he said, his voice still cold, but the suspicion was gone. Clara nodded and stood. She looked at Lily one more time, made sure she was still sleeping, then stepped out. Her heart beat faster with every step that carried her toward Vincent's office. She did not know what he wanted to say, but she had a feeling this would be the conversation that decided her future. When she walked into the office, Vincent stood with his back to the door, staring out the large window. On the desk, a thick brown envelope lay waiting. Vincent did not turn when Clara walked in. He stayed where he was, staring out the wide window as the afternoon light faded along the Chicago horizon. His shadow stretched across the wooden floor, tall and lonely. Clara stopped in the middle of the room, her eyes dropping to the thick brown envelope on the desk. She did not need to open it to know what was inside. Money, new papers, a new life, a door out of this world. "You can go," Vincent said, his voice low and tired. "Start over. No one will be able to find you." He still did not turn around. "There's enough money in there for you and Lily to live comfortably for years. New identification, completely legal. The address of a safe house in Oregon where no one knows who you are. You can disappear, Clara. You can have the normal life you deserve." Clara looked at the envelope, then at Vincent's back. He was giving her freedom. He was opening the cage door and telling her to fly. This was what she had dreamed of for 6 months. To get away from Derek, to be safe with Lily, to begin again from the beginning. So why did her heart ache at the thought of leaving? "Is this what you want?" she asked, her voice barely more than breath. Vincent was silent for a long time. His shoulders were rigid beneath the black shirt. "What I want doesn't matter," he finally said. "Your safety is what matters." Something broke open in Clara's chest. Not pain, but the wall she had built to protect her heart for so many years. She looked at the envelope again, then stepped past it. She did not take it. She walked up behind Vincent and stopped only inches from him. She could feel the warmth coming off his body, the familiar sandalwood of his cologne. "What if I tell you I'm safest here?" she whispered. "With you." Vincent went still. She saw his shoulders tremble slightly, as if he were holding something back. Then he turned, and Clara met storm-gray eyes filled with conflict. There was hope in them, but there was fear too. Fear of being refused, fear of loss, fear of believing in something and being hurt again. "Clara," he started, but she lifted her hand and rested it against his lips, stopping him. "I've seen your world," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I've seen violence, blood, and death. I know who you are, what you do, but I also saw something else." She lowered her hand and placed it against his chest, right over the hard, living beat beneath the fabric. "I saw the man who kept his promise, the man who risked his life to save the daughter of a maid who betrayed him, the man who held Lily like she was the most precious thing in the world." Tears began to slide down Clara's cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. "I don't want to go, Vincent. I don't want a safe life in Oregon, or money or new papers. I want to be here, with you." She looked straight into his eyes, her heart open for him to see. "I won't leave unless you tell me to, unless you say you don't want me here." Silence. The room was so quiet Clara could hear her own heartbeat. She waited, ready for rejection, ready for him to turn away and tell her to take the money and go. But Vincent did not. Instead, he lifted both hands and cradled her face. His palms were warm and a little rough, but his touch was so gentle, It made Clara want to cry all over again. He looked at her, as if she were the most miraculous thing he had ever seen. "Do you know what you're asking for?" he asked, his voice rough. "A life beside me won't be easy. There will be danger, there will be enemies, there will be nights I don't come home, and you won't know if I'm alive or dead." "I know," Clara whispered, "and I still choose you." That was all Vincent needed to hear. He lowered his head and kissed her. Their first kiss was soft and trembling, cautious as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Then it deepened, grew fierce, as if they were pouring into each other everything they had held back for so long. When they finally drew apart, they were both breathing hard. Vincent rested his forehead against hers, his gray eyes warm in a way she had never seen. "Stay," he whispered. "Both of you. Forever." 4 weeks passed like a beautiful dream Clara never wanted to wake from. The Romano estate was no longer her workplace. It had become home. The small maid's room had been replaced by the primary bedroom beside Vincent, and every morning she woke in his arms. Clara still had to pinch herself to be sure it was real. Lily recovered in a way that felt almost miraculous. The nightmares came less and less, replaced by bright laughter that rang through the big house. The little girl clung to Vincent like a tiny koala, followed him everywhere, demanded that he read to her before bed, and gave him a nickname no one else was allowed to use. "Vinny, Vinny, look what I drew." That morning, in the sun-soaked kitchen, Lily sat in her high chair at the breakfast table, a colored pencil in her hand, scribbling across paper. Rosa stood at the stove, frying pancakes and softly humming a Mexican folk song. The scent of butter and maple syrup filled the room. Clara sat beside Vincent on the sofa near the wide window, her head resting on his shoulder while he read the newspaper. This was the most peaceful moment she had ever known, an ordinary morning with her family. "I've been thinking about stepping back from the dangerous work," Vincent said suddenly, his voice low and thoughtful, "focusing more on legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, investments." Clara lifted her head to look at him, surprised. "Really?" Vincent nodded, gray eyes drifting to Lily as she happily drew. "I can't change the past. I can't erase who I used to be, but I can choose who I want to become." He looked down at Clara, his hand smoothing her hair. "For you, for Lily, I want to be a man worthy of you both." Clara smiled and placed her hand against his cheek. "I don't need you to be perfect, Vincent. I just need you home every night. I just need to know that when I wake up, you're still beside me." Vincent tilted his head and kissed her forehead, a tenderness she never thought she would receive from the coldest Mafia boss in Chicago. "Vinny, Mommy, look." Lily hopped down from her chair and ran to them, holding up the picture she had finished. She climbed onto the sofa, wedged herself between Clara and Vincent, and lifted her artwork high. It was a crayon drawing in the style of a 4-year-old child, but Clara could recognize right away what Lily meant to show. 3 people, a tall, dark-haired man, a brown-haired woman, and a blonde little girl in the middle, holding hands in front of a big house. Above them was a bright yellow sun with rays stretching everywhere. "This is my family," Lily announced proudly. "Mommy and Vinny and me, and this is our home." Clara felt her eyes sting. She looked at Vincent and saw him staring at the drawing, with something on his usually cold face that she had never seen before. Feeling, gratitude, love. Vincent lifted Lily onto his lap, one arm still around Clara. "That's beautiful, my little princess," he said, his voice rough. "It's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen." Lily grinned wide, threw her arms around Vincent's neck, and kissed his cheek. Clara looked at the 2 most important people in her life, and her heart filled with a kind of happiness she had thought she would never be able to touch. She had walked through hell, been beaten, threatened, forced to do things she hated. She had lived in fear and despair, believing she would never get out. But in the end, the light came from the last place she expected, from the arms of a Mafia boss with storm-gray eyes and a heart hidden behind a cold exterior. Sometimes, Clara realized, happiness does not arrive the way we expect. Sometimes, light pours out of the darkest places, and in the arms of darkness, she had finally found the light of her life. Our story today ends here. This is a story about love and sacrifice, about the strength of a mother willing to do anything to protect her child. It is also a story about redemption, about how a person can change when they find the right reason to change. The lesson we can take from it is to never give up hope, no matter how dark your circumstances may be. Believe there is always light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes the one who saves us comes from the most unexpected place. If you feel this story touched your heart, please tap the like button and share this video with the people you love. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories every day. We would truly love to know how this story made you feel. Have you ever lived through moments that felt hopeless, only to find hope again? What do you think about the love between Clara and Vincent? Leave a comment below. We want to hear what's in your heart. Finally, we wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days ahead. Thank you for staying with us. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.